Hey Eric, third time on the pod.
This is second time. Yeah.
Would you care to reintroduce yourself, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Eric Simpson. I am an identity coach. My primary goal and aim and purpose is really just to help connect people to who they truly are deep down in their core, so that they feel fully empowered to just be and express and just operate their true self within this world.
Wow, awesome. And where are you at the moment in the world?
Yeah, I'm in Seattle, Washington,
Cool.
in the US.
Yeah, love it. I'm Callum Wilson. I help people be all of themselves so that they can create deep happiness and high performance. I'm based in the south of England. I live in Dorset, but I'm often up in London. Off camera, we were talking about topics, and you reminded me of a book by Gay Hendricks, the Big Leap and the Upper Limit Problem. So do you want to kick us off by giving us some context around what that is, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the upper limit problem is something that I've been sort of thinking about, and as you said, the book, the Big Leap here, and just a little visual for y'all. His main sort of hypothesis with this problem, like the upper limit problem, is that each of us have this sort of inner sort of comfort, this inner sort of setting. He calls it his thermostat setting. So you think about the temperature in your home, you have that sweet spot that you really like. That just really kind of helps us determine how much love or success we allow ourselves to enjoy. And when you step out of that, let's say you step into a new job, a new relationship, whatever it might be, and it kind of throws all that equilibrium off, we often sabotage ourselves to drop us back into that old familiar zone. So, you drop back into old habits, you sabotage a job or relationship, whatever it might be, because it's scary. So that's kind of that upper limit problem in sort of general terms there.
Love it. And could you give us like a real life example of what an upper limit problem might look like outside of the living room and the thermostat, like what that might look like in the real world, the work world, maybe?
Yeah, so I know for myself, being and coming from the world of corporate Fortune 500 work, my background, I have an MBA, all these things, I've worked in Fortune 500 companies, all these things feels comfortable and safe. But as I would look to, say, my future and applying to, many years ago, applying to jobs that might stretch me or take me out of that familiar zone, one, I would either say, no, that I'm not qualified, I don't have the one little line item on the job description, so I'm not even going to apply. That could be an example of that. Or it could be you get that job, you get into it, and it is completely different than you've ever done before. So you might start, not showing up. You might try and do everything you can to try and maybe get back to that previous job, or it might scare you too much, and you just immediately jump to a different job or career just because you're in a spot that's uncomfortable. It's not because it's toxic or bad or anything like that. It's just new and unfamiliar, and you're not used to it yet.
Yeah, that's ringing so many bells. It's crazy how we can want something so much, and then when it comes time to stepping into it, we're like, oh, it's unfamiliar territory.
Yep.
And our survivor steps in and tries to keep us the same. That's a safe spot, isn't it? Being exactly where you are. And the funny thing about that is that even in your safe zone, you will be doing things that aren't good for you, but because you've survived having done them for so long, you'll keep doing them. It's like there's this great rugby player called Johnny Wilkinson, and when he became the best player in the world, he got voted that, it's like he then became about staying the same all the time, protecting what he is. And that meant that he continued to do things that he knew were bad for him, like training too much, overthinking, all of these sort of things. They were part of what got him there in his mind. So it's like, right, this is my sweet spot. I can't even let go of things that I don't like, because the uncomfortable things have actually become comfortable to me.
Right. Right. Or it's the things like I know this is something that I struggle with all the time. It's like the things that are so comfortable that they prevent you from like pushing yourself. So it's like, knowing it's like, oh, I should read a book or like, do some writing or something like that. But I'll just, rather just lay on the couch and just let Netflix, next episode. It's like, are you still watching? Yes. Like, it's like that comfort zone that just kind of keeps you in a spot that's not allowing you to grow. And there's nothing wrong with doing a Netflix binge or whatnot every now and then, but if that's only thing you do and you have dreams to do other things, you'll never achieve those other things.
Yeah, it's the choice between like living and growing versus just surviving. And the upper limit is a zone of growth and living and revealing and expressing. If you're not used to that, then you're going to want to stay in that like sweet spot on your temperature gauge, like it's always been. You don't want to change it, because that threatens, deep down, in some sort of sense, it threatens your survival. You don't know what it would be like to be. Would you survive? Of course, in the context that we're speaking, you're going to.
Right.
Have you? Are you experiencing that as you step more into like coaching more and more?
Absolutely. Like, it's kind of scary, because it's like I said, I grew up working in Fortune 500s, going and getting the classical sort of MBA schooling. And like, there's a lot of deep seated programming that says, sit at your desk, do your job, go home, repeat on an infinite loop.
Yeah.
But when you start to step outside of that and you say, like, you start to feel that sense of like, I'm meant to create something new. I'm meant to create my own business, work with other people, like challenge that sort of system. It's absolutely terrifying, especially when you have a foot in both camps. Because you're trying to do things over here to like build your brand or your business or your creativity, whatever it might be. And that feels like it could be threatening to this status quo, this job situation. So like for myself, like when I started writing and publishing to places like LinkedIn and Medium, it was absolutely terrifying, because it's like I'm connected with people on these platforms that are directly tied to my employment. And if they see it, like, am I going to be in trouble? Are they going to like it? Are they not going to like it? Am I going to lose my job? Like all of these things. So for the longest time, it prevented me from even writing and sharing my thoughts.
Yeah.
And since I've started, like, I was just like, you know what? I just have to risk it. Like, it got to the point where I couldn't not do it. There was just something deep inside me that said, you have to push through. And so as soon as I started pushing through and I started writing, I realized so far nothing has happened. There's been no conversations. There's been no like issues. Like, yeah, like my boss is like, she's liked a couple of my like posts. So it's like, oftentimes we up this level of like danger in our minds to the point of like freeze and don't do it, when in reality it's just sort of like no one cares. And shame on me for holding that back, because what I have to say, what you might have to say, might be the exact thing that someone needs to start their own journey.
Yeah, it's I was thinking about yesterday I was on a call with our friend Miriam, and we were talking about protection, and it's the same thing. Like, your ego wants to keep you in your comfort zone. It doesn't want to step into the unknown, and it will protect you anytime it feels you stepping into those areas. You use the word sabotage, and that saboteur is a protector of, or is trying to keep you back from exposure. And it's funny because the exposure that we're talking about, as you just alluded to, is the fiction of the ego. It's the all the stuff that has never happened. It's not even any particular evidence that it might happen, but it's going, oh, what if this and what if this? I was thinking about how you use the word, like, because quite often with people to get above, to transcend their upper limit, it feels like it's for what you described, it sounded like the trauma to stay where you were almost outweighed the trauma that was keeping you down. I've talked a lot about force versus power, and I think if you can use a little bit of willpower in the form of, like, courage, or a little bit of force in the form of courage, and of course it's courage because it is a threat to your idea of yourself when you change. And other people might not like that, but when you use that little bit of force, you said push, you so often find yourself straight into flow, and you're like, oh wow, like I'm at ease now and I'm flying along here, and this is easier than the life that I had before, where I was constantly denying myself, forcing myself back against what I knew to be true and what I was being called to do. Have you experienced that sort of, since you've sort of broken through your upper limit?
Like the imagery that's coming to mind, like when you're talking, is that of like a rocket ship. It's like the initial launch of a rocket ship is dangerous, traumatic, requires significant energy and push just to get this giant chunk of metal off the ground. But as soon as it kind of like gets moving and clears, all of a sudden the energy required to keep it going drops further and further and further and further. And so it becomes easier to do the thing. And so from my perspective, like, I'll use just sort of like writing and publishing content. That initially was very difficult, very, very difficult, because it was just like there was all those fears and traumas and what ifs going on in my mind. And I'm now to a point where, like, this week I've got my first week of already written content for the entire week, and it's already scheduled, and it will go live every single day for the rest of this week. And I'm just like, when I got done like doing all of that and like finished writing it and finished getting it into all the platforms and hitting schedule, it was just like, oh, this is great. I should do this every week. Like, that wasn't that hard. That wasn't that like difficult. Like, there's all these things in my mind. Like, why can't I just do this every week?
Mate, this is probably an odd thing to do mid podcast, but I feel like I'd be protecting and sabotaging myself if I didn't. And I want to say this in the most appreciative way, and in no way, like, I want to know this is not patronizing at all. Like, it has been so fucking cool to see you step into yourself. I said it off camera a little bit, but just hearing you say that, and like the fucking energy of being like, yeah, I fucking prepped this up, and like a few months ago was none of that, and now it's like I've got a whole week of expression of myself lined up, and it's super motivating, mate. Like, seeing you light up, you're lighting me up. It's great leadership, so I really appreciate you for that.
I appreciate that. You had mentioned the word sabotage earlier, and one of the articles that I wrote back in February, is one of the few that I would post. Like, it was like once every other week, maybe, like just trying to test the waters. And it was I had done the exercise from Rich Litvin, the perfect system. And it was my perfect system for sabotaging my dreams. And it was just like, it was the easiest thing to do this diagram of like, here's all the things that I do that sabotage my dreams.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, like, I was messaging back and forth with a mutual friend and coach of ours, Bobby, and he, like, I sent him the initial like drawing of my system, and he reframed it and like put it into this story of all the things that I had written, and it was just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I can like write an article based off of this.
Yeah.
I sent him that article. He's like, great, I love it. Now do the inverse, the perfect system for achieving your dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that challenge, I accepted it, was the scariest fucking thing that I have ever done.
Yeah.
It took me 2 months just to have the courage to sit down and actually just draw it out on a piece of paper.
Wow.
And then it sat in this wooden box right here
Yeah.
behind me for 2 more months before I
Yeah.
had the courage to even bring it out and write anything about it.
Yeah.
And that article goes live on Thursday.
Fuck. Let's go. Do you know what? I think you mentioned something there, and I think it's a really useful tool for people. So I'm going to do my best to explain how I've seen it being used, but I haven't done the perfect system. But I remember being on a call with Rich, and someone was saying like, oh, my clients show up like this, all my clients like all my friends end up like. It's like, shit, you're so good at creating like bad clients and bad friends, and like, how do you do that? And then it was like, tell me how you create that. And that is your perfect system for creating, because you are the creator of your life. How are you creating all these bad scenarios? And then obviously what you've done there is flip it back. Am I interpreting that right? Is that pretty much how it goes?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like it's you realize you have this problem. Like I was just, like, that was the thing for me. It's like I realized I was always sabotaging my dreams. Like every time I would be like, oh, this would be amazing to do, I would let fear kick in and kill the process.
Yeah.
And so that's the high level, like hyper, like the macro level. So like, what are all the little things that happen underneath that fear? And I think, Rich has it, says like, okay, what are the big steps that you do to sabotage your dreams?
Right.
Now get even more detailed. What are 3 like tinier but equally important steps that have to happen in order for me to sabotage my dream?
Wow.
And so like, that's definitely like, that's an upper limit problem. Like me sabotaging my dream was a prevention, like me not allowing myself to step beyond that comfort, beyond that fear, instead of stepping into it and seeing, what if I actually did this? What if I actually challenged myself? What positive thing could happen, instead of focusing on the, oh, I might lose my job, I might get in trouble, I might never, like, forget all that.
Yeah.
Like, what if good things happened? And so that was how I tried to reframe it, because I was like, with the success was, what if, like, first I had to try and identify, have I ever done things to achieve my dreams? And that was a challenge in and of itself, because I've generally been more pessimistic about my own process in life. So reframing that into like here's all the areas where I have succeeded, where I have achieved the dreams. Going back and get my MBA, that was a dream. Getting a job at, Expedia, that was a dream. Like all of these things, traveling the world, like what are the things that I did to step into those?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I can't share this thought that it's something that I was saying yesterday, but how your ego is built from your experience of the world, right? And experiences is things that right? And when you know what something, it feels comfortable to you, or your comfort zone is full. Your ego is built out of your comfort zone. It's built out of stuff that you know. But if you want to be the truest version of you, which you don't really know yet because you haven't expressed it, or you want to have things and do things that you don't know or you haven't yet realized, it means stepping into the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And your ego is going to go, no, because what happens if? And it's an amazing thing to realize that I am in the unknown. I exist in the unknown, and so do my dreams. And if I want to get to those dreams, it means not having confidence, because confidence is comfort. Confidence is knowing. It means not feeling comfortable. It means I'm going to have to learn and expose myself. It means dropping protection. But it also makes it fun, because it means that when I'm stepping into not protecting myself and areas that I don't know, there's a bloody good chance that I'm about to become who I feel I'm called to be, and do what I'm called to do through that being. And I mean, like, a big realization for me in the last couple of months is that, like, it's courage. I agree that if you're really in your ego, if you're really in your experience, if you're in your limiting beliefs, then it takes courage to break through it. But if you see yourself a step back from it, as the observer of the experience, because you're not the experience of the world, you're the observer of it, it feels a bit easier to me to navigate my way to where I want to get to. I'm not so tied into, oh, I can only be like this, or I can only be like this. It's like, no, I have, from back here, for those of you who can't see, I'm leaning backwards as to observe my hands rather than be in my hands. So yeah, I don't know, I kind of rambled a little bit there, but my closing thought on that is, like, what a fucking shame to put a limit on yourself because you stay within comfort. And I don't know where this comes from, but I really, really don't want to die thinking, yeah, I never really knew myself, and I never really went for it. So quite often use that fear to counteract the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that just popped into my head, was a quote from this last season of Ted Lasso. And, no spoilers or anything, but it's like the main character, Ted, is in the locker room at halftime with his team. And he's like, and he said something to the extent of, like, sports would be a lot less fun if we already knew the outcome.
Yeah.
Sports are fun because we show up, we play the game, and we accept whatever comes of the end. So it's like, oftentimes we limit ourselves because we don't know the outcome. We don't show up, we don't play the game because the outcome is unknown. But that's the fun part of it.
Yeah.
It's scary to step out on that field, but once you start actually playing the game in the unknown, you can have fun.
Yeah. I just thought about you can get good at the uncomfortable. You can get good at risk. There's a book called The Comfort Crisis by a bloke called Michael Easter, and at the start he talks about a concept called misogi. I think misogi is a Japanese concept where every couple of years you take on a challenge, which there's a couple of rules, like it can't be a threat to your life, but it has to be something that really pushes you, so much so that, like, even if everything went perfectly, you'd only have 50% chance of success, a 50% chance of failure. And the idea is that, like, you constantly expose yourself to discomfort to show yourself that it's okay, and to reap the benefits of what discomfort and even failure can bring you in terms of information and growth. So I've been posting a little bit on social media for the first time ever. And yeah, it's just like the same thing. I'm not jumping into shark infested water, but it's just, oh, fuck it. Like, nothing really happened. If you didn't get as many likes, like, I'm safe. And I think that's kind of the point that I was trying to make before. Like, it feels like a threat doing all of these things, but it's not. There's only a threat to your ego, and your ego is not you. You're you're the unaffected consciousness that observes all of those things. I know I'm talking slightly spiritually here, but like once you realize you're actually unaffected, like you putting those posts out hasn't fundamentally changed what you are, has it?
No.
When if you've played a gig, I see the guitars behind you. Eric, for people listening, Eric is a fucking rock star, a punk rock star actually. But like you have a bad gig, like it doesn't actually affect you fundamentally at all. There is actually no risk, and I think once you start to understand that, and you stop identifying with what you do and what you have, you become a much less limited version, and certainly your upper limits are much, much higher.
Yeah. Yeah. You had mentioned something earlier around like this feeling of like not knowing who you are plays a factor into that. And I 100% agree. It's like, you know, before I did a lot of the work of just like, who am I? And like really figuring out my own core identity, you know, it's like, it was a lot harder to step into these unknowns. It was a lot harder to get myself moving because it's just like, I didn't know what I was stepping into because I had no like center of like self. And so it's like, that's the thing that like, I love working with people on is like, let's define that center of self so you can have the courage to step into that unknown.
Yeah. It's when I spoke to Anne-Sophie a while back, and she was like, we were talking about where we think we are in our journeys, and I thought like, well, I'm really just at the start, because I was in such a confusion about who I was, because I was so wrapped up in the last contract I got, or the last game that I played, or whatever someone had written about me or not written about me, whatever. I thought that I was all of those things. I thought all of those things defined me. So, you know, in terms of like when you're expressing yourself, I was like, fuck, I kind of don't know who I am. And you're completely lost at that point because you're hitting limits all over the place. You're like, why am I fucking struggling to do that? It's like, well, because you identify as a rugby player, if you don't get a contract, then you feel like you're worthless. So of course you're going to struggle to go and expose yourself to, can't actually think of a good example in terms of this, but like to try something else, or I kind of lost my chain of thought there a little bit, but just wanted to pick up on what you said. Basically, when you know, you have a better concept of what you are, it's much easier to start to create a life that you want, because you're a lot less limited.
Yeah. Because it's like I've seen there's like an example of like a diagram where someone draws a circle and then they draw arrows like coming out of it, so it kind of looks like a sun, like a drawn sun, versus then like a circle with a single arrow pointing in one direction. And it's a lot easier when you know that sort of direction to move versus like, oh, try this, I have to come back. Oh, I'll try this, I have to come back. Oh, I'll try this. Like, that's a lot more exhausting, that like sun picture, to try and like try all these things versus having like, all right, here's who I am, this direction I'm going. And then you can pivot along the way, but versus just having to like, well, I'm going to step into the dark, at least. I don't know. That's kind of what came to my mind.
Yeah. I was thinking about an upper limit problem that I realized I had last night. I was sitting with my girlfriend, and we were like, I watched this program mainly to keep up my French, but it's about an estate agency in Paris, and they go to all these luxury houses. And I was looking at it, I was like, I'm not even going to aim. I literally was telling myself, I'm not even going to aim for that. Because I was like, if I aim for that, I'm going to fail. Even though I'm looking at these houses, like, I'd love to do it. And I was like, talking to Lucy about it, and we were like discussing, you know, like what a nice house would be like. And I realized it was actually kind of difficult for me to say it, because I was like open, but even by just saying it, I was opening up the possibility that I might fail to get there, which is hilarious, isn't it? Like the idea of something was creating fear in me.
Mm-hmm.
I fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. I feel so grateful that I've got like now the understanding, oh no, that's just because you stepped into thinking you are the experience of the world, what you have now, and that if you fail, it would mean anything to you, it mean anything about you. And then you step back and go, it doesn't mean anything. If I aim for that and if I don't get it, it doesn't mean anything about me. It's not a mark on my soul.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how we can just put ourselves into situations and then immediately say we'll never be able to achieve that, when you don't even know if that's what you want to achieve to begin with. And so you're already shutting doors on things that you haven't even tried.
Yeah. If you don't achieve it, it doesn't change anything about Eric. Like if you don't end up playing at Glastonbury or in a 10-bedroom, I don't even know if that's a goal, but you know what I mean, like with a 10-bedroom house, like it doesn't change who you are, it doesn't affect you, it doesn't, but you make it mean that, so then you shit yourself when you go for it and expose the idea that, oh, I'm a failure.
Well, I think some of that also plays into this idea that we're trying to also do things to please other people. And so it's like there's the expectation of like, oh, like, societal expectations of like, oh, you should, get married and have kids and get the big house with the white picket fence. At least that's a big thing here in the US. Like that's like the American dream.
Yeah.
And if you don't do those things by X date, like, X age, all of a sudden you're like, there's something wrong with you, or you're looked down upon, you're a pariah in society, like all these things. And it's just like, you can't like judge people based on that. It's like you're immediately putting other people into a box, or you feel like other people are putting you into a box. So you're chasing dreams that may or may not be your own dreams. And so, the sense of like, that's also part of that upper limit. It's like someone is putting you into a box and putting you into these areas. But it's also this sense of like, when that was the dream of mine, like growing up, like I was just like, okay, that's just what's expected of me. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And when I actually started digging in, being like, okay, what is it that I believe, like politically, religiously, spiritually, like, economically, like all of these things, I started to be like, well, maybe that is my dream. Maybe it's not. I'll put that one over here for now. I don't want this. I definitely want this. That is unconventional. And everyone thinks it's weird, but I definitely want that. Like,
Yeah.
You start having that direction and that sense of like, okay, I can start challenging some of these like fears and these upper limits, and I can start stepping into these unknowns. For myself, like doing the work of finding my core values was huge in that. Because suddenly it's like, oh, I have words around why I feel the way I feel in certain situations. Or if I feel like I'm in this like just funk and I'm like, I'm just putting myself into a box, now I know how to break out of it in safe ways that empower me and charge me. Because I think that's important when we're talking about upper limits, is when you're in these zones of fear, do you have ways of reassuring yourself without stepping back down?
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about, and that's like how basically, I suppose what you're saying is like how to expose yourself to the fear. But then I also think it'd be really interesting if you're comfortable talking a little bit about, because I was thinking about how the limits, people put you into boxes, as you said, and how like these can kind of be created for you, or at least subconsciously, through family and friends and expectations, and that are created through those relationships. And like, without even knowing it, like you're actually aiming for something you don't want. That is a really interesting thing to consider. But before we talk about that, I wanted to say, we did something in AFGO in our community where we all shared we were meant to share 15% into like something that felt scary to share. That was the original rule. And of course, like a group of coaches, like the first person just went fully in and we all just followed.
They just said cannonball and
Yeah, but I want to speak about my experience, but like recently I've just completely you could call it vulnerable, but it doesn't feel vulnerable because I know I'm safe, but it's like I completely stopped protecting myself almost. Like I'm trying to drop protection in every single way. And I haven't really considered like doing that in a way that felt within sort of like a good level of exposure, because you know, like that 15%, or I can't remember the exact words you used, but it's sort of like doing it in a way that felt safe, kind of exposing yourself. And like I just think fuck it. I'm just like fuck it, I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. I've always been a bit like that. Every time I actually, this is a really funny example, but we used to go, like when you're young, you used to go to like residential trips in the UK, so you go abseiling and stuff like that. I'm actually really bad of heights, but my way of getting over it is to be like, right, let's go straight to the biggest one. I'm going to do it first. I'm just going to fully go for it straight away. That's weirdly like when I stop protecting myself, I'm like, I do it in such a like on it's such a big way. But what you described there felt more like an easing into it in some ways. Is that right?
well, I think it's going to be different for everybody. It's like, you know, some people it's just like you just need to like rip the band-aid and just go all out.
Yeah.
You know, other people like that's way too much. Like that's going to send them into like a catatonic like state of like I'm just never ever going to do this again because it was too much. So it's all about finding that balance, but also being in a zone of like constantly like challenging yourself. And I want to be cautious of saying like constantly challenging yourself, because I feel like oftentimes we're told like you should always be growing, you should always be like trying to succeed and level up and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily what I'm like talking about. Like challenging yourself could be just like, oh, I feel like I want to paint a picture that will never be seen by the world and it's just for me. Like that's great. Challenging yourself could be going for that promotion. Challenging yourself could be like jumping out of an airplane, or, you know, like asking that person out that you've been wanting to ask out forever. Like there's various levels and there's various reasons why people do it. So it's just about finding that thing that's going to be challenging, but also like not out of alignment with who you are.
Oh man, you've captured like loads of points that I was thinking about in terms of like I don't like this like grind hustle try idea, because seems like a lot of suffering to try and be happy a lot of the time. But when I think about the fundamental for me in not in my upper in any upper limit problem, it's the only question I want to ask is, am I constantly being me and expressing that being? I'm not trying it, because it's, and Rick Rubin, who you'll know in the music world, his great book, The Creative Act, he says, be and do, don't think and try. That's fucking right. It's just like be yourself and do whatever flows out of that. So it's be me, and then whatever doing comes from that, like so be it. And I'm not really going to think too much about it. And I noticed that you said you were talking about art, and you said I feel like this. I think that's it. You don't sit there and decide to do stuff. You just feel what feels right, made up by, you know, God, nature, intuition. I always use those three because whatever one works for you.
Right.
Nature tells you, gives you that feeling, because you can't sit there and go, I'm going to want to like, I'm going to force myself to want to paint. You just feel like painting, whatever way you look at it. And it's just about exposing yourself to being called to what you feel is right, and doing what you feel called to do, and being who you feel called to be, expressing in a way you feel called to express. And I think for me, like, that seems a really limitless experience. just not getting in the way of what's coming through me, not getting in the way of the flow. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. No, it reminds me of another coach that I met, like it was like a year ago. She and I were talking about something very similar. And we were talking about this whole concept of like fake it till you make it. And she's like, I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
Because it's like faking something is like you're coming from inauthenticity. Like you're telling yourself, I am a fraud.
Yeah.
And she's like, I prefer be it than become it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like what you said, be it then do it. Like it's just like, no, I'm gonna be a writer. It doesn't matter if it sucks, it doesn't matter if it's great. Like I'm just like, I am a writer.
Yeah.
And I'm going to write. And the more that I tell myself that I'm a writer and the more that I write, the more that I become a writer.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about alter egos before in one of the other episodes, and I think that's kind of what alter egos allow you to kind of access they kind of weirdly give you permission to be who you want to be in a way. And they give you access to a different part of your consciousness, or our consciousness, our shared consciousness, which you kind of go, oh, what would like, oh, I'm going to fake it. So what would Eric do in this conversation I'm going to have with a Fortune 500 company? And I'm able to then sort of access how you would be and what you would say. But in reality, it's flowing through me. So it is me. This fake it till you make it is basically giving yourself permission to express yourself in the way that you kind of know is appropriate and feels right. Oh, I'm going to go in there and be confident and say what I think. It's like that feels like, saying what you think is right feels like what you should be doing anyhow. So
yeah,
you're kind of, all you're really doing is answering to the call. By faking it, you're just giving yourself, like, it's another way of accessing expression of who you want to be, of who you are.
Yeah. But it's like, I that really resonated with me when she said it. It was just like, oh man, like because people can tell if you're truly like becoming and embodying like yourself when you're stepping into that environment, versus like, oh, like these putting on some sort of facade and that's not like hit their genuine like sense. Like you can typically tell that between somebody. It's like, oh yeah, you're just kind of putting on a show, trying to like get likes or attention or money or whatever, versus like, you go see your favorite, musician or whatever, and it's just like they are fully embodied in themselves up on stage, and it's magnetizing. Like you just are drawn to their energy. And so it's like, I think that's kind of the difference, is just sort of like that like off-putting versus like magnetizing like sense that people can sense when you either are coming from this place of fake, like false sense, versus like true sense of like being.
Yeah, I do you know what I noticed though, is that like because I don't think I've been used to loads of people as in a full expression of all that they can be, a full expression of themselves. When I've met people, when I see it, my knee-jerk reaction is to be like, whoa, what the fuck is going on here? I'm almost like threatened by it, mainly because they're able to be who I wish I could be. I mean, this is probably talking a few years ago. I don't necessarily feel like that so much now, but and in my mind, I want to critique them as like, oh, they're faking it. But sometimes, like, because you're not used to that full expression, it can feel fake, but it's the realest thing. And then I'm just thinking of one particular bloke who I played rugby with, and he's just like, his name's Kamami. I'm just going to shout him out in case he ever listens to this. But like, the first time I met him, I was like, is this guy like for real? Like he's so wildly like expressive and different. I was like, he can't keep this up. And then like, I've known him since I guess maybe like 2017, and the guy is fully himself. Like it's never changed. And yeah, I think he's one of the most like natural beers I've ever met. And it was quite something to observe the first time I saw it. Now I'm around more and more people that express themselves fully. I mean, some people are quiet, right? Or when it doesn't come across like that, but there's some people you know, oh yeah, that's a full expression. And it's a really powerful example to be around.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's, I would tend to agree. It's like I use the example of a musician and like a performer, and it's like that's magnetizing because it's like, okay, they're in their element. But when you're meeting somebody like that just in real life, it can be overwhelming because you're just like, hold up, like the power that's radiating off of this person is almost too much.
Yeah.
And it can be intimidating, and you start comparing yourself and judging yourself and all these kinds of things, again putting yourself in that upper limit, unconsciously probably, but you're telling yourself it's like that can't be real because I'm so used to being around myself or other people who aren't fully capable of expressing themselves.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I think, like, I mean, I'm certainly not 100% there, but as I'm more and more me, I people either seem to like really resonate with me or not. And I think one of the comments that people give me, which I'm not sure I'm like totally happy with, but I would say like, and they've kind of said it even before I felt like I really knew and expressed myself, but like quite intense. And it can be a little bit intense when you're with someone that's like fully like in line. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've got members of our group and I'm like, whoa, that's a shitload of energy right there.
Right, exactly. Like there's some of those people in our community that I've known a lot longer than our community. Like we were in a different program beforehand. And I remember the first time experiencing their energy, it was just sort of like, I need to like, I'm good in the group setting, but I don't know if I could do one-on-one.
Yeah.
But now I'm just like, no, I love that. It's like, I don't necessarily maybe want to express myself in the same way you are, because then that would be fake. That wouldn't be myself.
Yeah.
But to have the freedom of that full expression, that freedom of like, I'm throwing the lid off the upper limit box to just like be in this world, to express myself in writing, in music, in speaking, in coaching, in business, whatever it might be. Like the funny thing for my own self is the evolution of my tattoos.
Yeah.
It's like the very first tattoo I got was directly here on my chest. And I was just like, it was personal to me. I didn't want anybody else to see it unless I opened it up to you.
Right.
It's kind of stepping into expression, but it's like, I'm not allowing anybody else to see this version of myself.
Yeah.
You know, the next one here on my right arm, it kind of peeks out just a teeny tiny bit with a short sleeve shirt, but it's not like, it's like if you were to just like walk past me, you probably would never even see it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
And then, you know, it's like now I've got the half sleeve on the left arm that's like definitely like visible when I'm in a short sleeve shirt. And now I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, let's go full sleeve. Like, you know, it's like this full expression of like, okay, like this is an element that's very important to me. It's like, I love being able to express myself with tattoos.
Yeah.
Why hold back based again on outdated ideals of like tattoos are unprofessional, like if you have visible ones you'll never get a job, like all of these things. And yes, there are still businesses and companies and industries that operate that way, but if those are if that's how they operate, I don't want to be in that zone anyway.
Oh yeah, 100%. I kind of want to bring this conversation into creativity, but through that through that lens of like started sharing a bit more on social media, as I said, and people are like, oh, like, how do you feel about it? Like a couple of people said, oh, you should do this and you should do that. Like, what if people think this? I'm like, fuck it. If people don't like me for me, that's okay. they're just not my people, or at least they're not at the moment. Maybe, I think we're all in the same team, but like, we don't have to like spend a heap of time with
Yeah.
people that resonate so highly with us. So it's like that with work. It's like, if they don't want tattoos, that's cool. Like, I'm just obviously like not meant to, or it's not meant to be at the moment. Maybe they'll change their mind, but I totally get that. And but it falls into like our second topic, which was creativity, if you're happy to go there with it.
Yeah, let's do it.
I feel like tattoos are creativity, for example, and like, if people don't like tattoos, that's fine, but I find it actually like expression and creative expression are actually a really, really good filter, because like, I'm actually expressing myself before I've opened my mouth, and you will decide how you think about that. And like,
Yeah.
I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but if you can't get through the tattoos, then like, maybe we're just not going to speak. By the way, for anyone listening who doesn't know, like, Eric's got a fair few tattoos, and so do I. So it's like obvious we've got tattoos, right? So like, it's, if people are willing to judge a book by its cover, then they're probably not my people. That's the point. And the same with like, when you put stuff online or you're sharing your articles, it's a really fucking good filter, isn't it? Like, instead of be upset that people don't fuck with it, it's like the people that do, oh no, now we can like, we've kind of qualified each other already that we're interested
Right.
through the content, through my creativity. We've already created a connection.
Right. And I think, creativity is one of those things that I struggled with, just the definition for the longest time. It's like creativity to me was all about just like, oh, if you're creative, like you can paint a picture and it's in museums, or like you can draw, like there was that like artistic like expression. But creativity really is like, the more that I've like sat with it, is just, creativity is just how you live.
Yeah.
Like it could be as simple as just like taking a walk with your phone and recording your thoughts and a video and putting it online.
100%. Mate, I'm creating a sentence as I speak.
Yeah.
It's like that. I realized that whole life is creative. The way you move, you like create your meals every day. You're constantly in a state of it, and so it's funny to be so precious around it, since it is basically all it is. It's an expression of being.
Right.
But yeah, it took me until recently to kind of see myself as creative or artistic in any way, and but now, like, recognizing that like life is creativity, it feels really fun. It feels like, feels like it feels less determined, and I have a bit more, not control, but like a bit more say in where this goes, since I feel like I'm creating my life. Do you find that you have did you get like nervous in the same way before performing music, which is extremely creative, I think? Is it the same feeling you get before you go and like share posts, or is there like a different form of limit in that?
It's definitely different, because they're both using that sort of like the creative side of the brain, but they're using it very differently. Like music is just, it's a second language. So they're both targeting like the language side of the how you communicate and whatnot, but being able to read and communicate with with music is different than speaking or writing or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So in some sense there is some similarities, but in another sense, like for my musical journey, it's like I grew up in a household that was very musical. My mom taught piano out of our home for 14 years. And so it's like by the age of 5, I was sitting down at the piano and learning how to read music, and I was performing for like little piano recitals and stuff like that. So it's like from like age 5, 6. So it's like I've been in this zone of this creativity and this expression and performing in front of people for, 30 plus years.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's that experience and comfort with it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the thing that's a little bit different with the music as well is as I've stepped into, okay, this is my genre. This is what these are the things that I love about music, or these are the genres that I love. And I'm getting into groups with people that I love. It's so much easier and so much freeing and so much, like the feelings of just like, it doesn't matter if I hit a wrong note or not, or if I'm entering the wrong place or like, it doesn't matter, because we're all just here and we're all together and we're all like, the crowd doesn't care. Like, so what if I hit a wrong note? One wrong note, if you can just like transition right back into the rest of it, it's like, it can be either completely forgettable, like no one cares, or it can be an amazing, memorable experience of just like, oh my God, you remember when that happened? How it just like changed everything, and like the dissonance and just like it just hurt. But then all of a sudden it was like joyous again. Like,
Yeah.
that's very different. Because like I get this adrenaline, like this like excitement and adrenaline and just like passion. But like writing is very different, because it's like I never considered myself a writer. I never considered myself, even when I started writing, to be a very good writer. So it was always just this constant like, I am bad at this, or I am new and it's hard. Where with music, it's like, yeah, learning new music is hard.
Hmm.
You got to memorize it. It's like the last group that I was in, we would play 3-hour shows. And so it's like you had to have memorized 20, 30 songs to fill that amount of space. And so it's like, that's hard.
Yeah.
But it's easier because I've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
Whereas
Did
writing, it's harder because it's just like, I am judging myself. I'm limiting myself. Like, what if this gets rejected? Like all these things that we've talked about prior. So
Yeah. I was thinking though, did you write music or not really? Did you more perform something that was already made?
I've only ever really done performing of pre-made pieces. So it's like playing in cover bands, it's like I grew up in a church setting. So it's like, playing on the music team on Sundays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like the style of music has definitely evolved from sort of like church music to, now it's like the sort of like classic rock, the Fleetwood Macs and the Beatles and those kinds of things, all the way up to like the hardcore punk side of things. So it's like the style of music has changed, but the process hasn't.
Right. Yeah. Because I was thinking, I was just going to pull this quote up. The in Rick Rubin, in Rick Rubin's book about the difference between art and craft. Have you heard that?
I feel like I'm familiar with the concept, but I can't remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah, so there's like a slight distinction, and I have a feeling playing music rather than writing music is probably the difference. Like, see if I can find it wrong. It says, if you know what you want to do and you do it, that's the work of a craftsman. If you begin with a question and you use it to guide an adventure of discovery, that's the work of an artist. So I was thinking your writing sounds more like an art and the music sounds more like a craft to you.
Interesting. Yeah, it's quite possible. Like there have been a few, like 1 or 2 times where I've sat down and be like, okay, can I write a song? And instantly I feel like I'm back at that age of 5. What are the keys on the piano? What are the little black dots on the page? Like everything all of a sudden drops to that, like, I'm a loser, I'm a beginner, like this is awful, this is just no one, this does not need to be heard by literally anybody.
Yeah.
But give me, you know, a Fleetwood Mac song to learn, or Michael Jackson, or Rise Against, or somebody like that. And I'm just like, all right, like it might take me time, but I'll
Yeah.
do it and I'll love it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've done a few like presentations or speeches in the past, and like it's funny because I guess the craft, if you were to in a sense of craft, a speech would be like something that's pre-written, and you just read it out, or you memorize it and read it. And then the art would be like just starting with an idea and riffing. And I've realized I much prefer the art side of it. Like, I'd much prefer just to like, I think I'm going to do a speech maybe in a while for a school, and I'm like, fuck, I'm actually not going to prepare anything. Which I know would scare more people, but it scares me more. Well, I just don't really like it, having to memorize something. It feels like it doesn't feel right to me. So I thought that was just interesting. Like, I think if I play music, the idea of getting up and playing a song that everyone knows what it's meant to sound like and having to like recreate it, I think that would like be really difficult for me. But like putting out something new when people don't really like know what it's meant to sound like, they've got no reference point, might feel slightly easier for me, or at least in some scenarios. Do you are you with me?
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. Like, one of the gigs we played like several years ago, there was somebody who wanted to hear a certain song, and they had to leave, and so we're like, well, we'll just slide it up the set list. That's fine. And it was Journey's "Don't Stop Believing."
Right.
You know, that everybody who has listened to music knows that song.
Yeah. For people who don't, shall I sing it?
If you
Yeah.
don't, look it up. It's a great song.
Yeah.
But it's got a very iconic bass line. And I was playing bass in this band, and it's like I'm playing the bass line, but this fan of this song knew that the bass player plays with his fingers versus a pick, and I'm a pick player versus a finger player. I'm not as fast, and I could tell he was disappointed with how I was playing with a pick versus my fingers, even though I was playing the actual notes correctly.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're always going to have like the critics. You're always going to have, no matter what, even if you're doing it correctly, even if
Yeah.
you're putting your own little spin on it, like you're always going to have that like critique and whatnot, and that's fine. You, like with creativity, you kind of have to just like let that roll off your shoulder and keep moving. You know, it's like with you with the speeches, it's like you find what works for you and you
Yeah.
move with it. It's like, yeah, like playing or having to write and memorize and then, you know, speak verbatim will feel potentially less like yourself and being authentic than maybe coming with a post-it note with like 2 or 3 words written on it, just as kind of like a guide and a map, and just riffing off of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's really interesting. The thing that was coming up for me was this this idea of like, it's only your task to express who you are and what feels right, and it's their task to decide what they think. And you know, like, you don't get to decide what nature thinks about itself, you being it and it being them, whatever, but you're all in this together, and it will interpret itself how it wants, and it's not a reflection of you really in any way, whether they like it or not. And also, like, because you know that from like, you'll release an article and you're like, oh, why did that one seem weaker than that one? Like, I'd have thought that one would have got more response or whatever.
Right.
You don't get to decide that. All you get to do is like, as in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, you have a right to your labor, but not the fruits of your labor. Something like that. I fucking love that. It's like, yeah, it's just you have a right to the labor of creation, but you've got no right to whether people like it or not. And like, if you try and have a right to the labor, to the fruits, then you're really just trying to manipulate people, and like, you're not God. you don't, or whatever, you're not the creator of the earth itself. You don't have control over what people think. So it's kind of funny for me to now voice this and think like, Christ, a lot of what I'm trying to do is manipulate how people feel about me when I release content. When I think
Mm,
about that, like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore.
yeah.
You with me?
Yeah. It's like the point of creativity is to create.
It's not to manipulate.
It's like creativity is just the act of creating something, whether it's words or videos or art or music or whatever it is. And it's just like, that's the point of being creative, is just to put out. And like you said, you can't control what people are going to do or how they're going to respond. Like that is outside of your realm of control. Your control is whether you hit submit or you hit publish or you hit record or
Yeah.
you open the paint or whatever it is. Like that is in your control.
Yeah.
And I think it's more important to create than not. You know,
Yeah.
we live very much in a consumeristic world where we consume so much more than we create. And I know I'm guilty of that, like myself, like, but I'm trying to at least level that out to where I'm creating as much as I'm consuming, because I don't know what my words are going to do for other people. Are they, are they going to draw them to me to work together? Are they going to like give them inspiration to go do something of their own? I don't know. But if I don't create, I'll never know. That
Yeah.
person will never know.
100%. It's selfish to not express something that could like really resonate with someone else just because out of self-preservation. And I was thinking a couple of things, like when people don't like your stuff and they voice it to you, like they're the ones feeling pain, not you. It's their disappointment. You don't have to, like, just because they're drinking poison, you have to drink it with them.
Right.
But I was also thinking that actually when you recognize, like, it does take a bit of courage at the start of any of this expression to go and do it, and that whether or not like you like what people do, you feel so much like pride in humanity when you see someone just fucking laying it bare, exposing themselves to criticism. So I think it's so inspiring to watch people do that. You shared a video of you, and so did Jonah. And as much as I enjoyed both of you expressing yourselves, the main feeling I had was like pride that people are willing to express themselves, and the feeling of permission that I got from doing that. I was really grateful for. So kind of when I see people just owning themselves and not protecting themselves, expressing themselves, not hiding themselves, I really do just feel like this immense gratitude in some way. For people and humans being all that they can be. It's such a great part of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you use the word permission, and it's not permission from others that you need to create. It's giving yourself permission to create.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big distinction, was just sort of like, no one's going to come up to you and say, Callum, I'd really love it if you could create 10 videos on these 10 topics. Like, I give you permission to do that. Like, no, that's like, it's like probably never going to happen. So it's like, you have to tell yourself, no, like these things are in my head, or I don't know what's in my head. I'm just going to hit record and go for a walk and see what happens.
Yeah.
But to give yourself the permission to say, like, I am going to give myself that, like, okay, to just start. And then, that's what I did with my writings. Like, there's been a couple people who have like commented or sent me messages being like, thank you so much for sharing this. Like, you have no idea how much like you saying these things have meant to me. And it's just like, damn, like,
Yeah.
like like 1 or 2 messages for every like 10, 15, 20 articles like that is super empowering.
100%. And you did that, like those people might have even liked and shared the fucking thing. Like the point is that you can give people value, and they just because they didn't tell you or like acknowledge it through a click, it doesn't mean that you're not like creating a ripple effect of inspiration. I was thinking about the permission, and I was thinking how much like that, you know, a bit people do different things with their egos or their protectors of a bit. I sort of imagine mine as a young child, and like when I acknowledge it and just say like, I've got this, like I don't want to protect myself anymore, that child always goes like, cool, thanks for acknowledging me. I'd say thank you for like looking after me, but I've got this. And like that child gives me permission, which is me giving me permission. Which I think is a great thing that you alluded to there. It's not permission from the other people. It's their expression allowing you to give yourself permission. And I think it's kind of, to like link it back to the start, it's saying to the saboteur like, no, I'm going to go and do this. And it's saying to the protector like, I don't want you to protect me. And it's opening up. It's opening up and being all that you can be. That's what creativity is. It's seeing your limit, and instead of closing to it, it's relaxing and opening up, stepping forward. It's coming from a place of like knowing that it might feel like vulnerability at the start, but eventually it's just stepping into your power and being all that you can be. That's what I think it is.
Yeah, I see creativity as the process of going from that like be it, then become it. Right. Creativity is the thing that leads you from one to the other.
Nice. It's like a bridge.
You know, it's the bridge. It's like, okay, like I am a writer. Now I actually have to write.
Oh yeah.
To actually become a writer.
It's like calling greatness out of yourself.
Right. It's like, I am a coach. Now I actually have to coach to become a coach.
Yeah. There's another coach who I follow, a guy called Joel Burgess. I haven't had much interaction with him, but he seems like a great bloke. And he talks about forcing functions. So like, you know, people would say, oh, should I wait until I've got too many people in the factory before I go and get the new factory? Or do I go and get the new factory and then, which is going to force me to fill it? Are you with me? Yeah. So I get the new factory, so I have to fill it. It's like when you go, I am a writer, it's like a forcing function to writing. You're kind of saying, well, right, well, I've created a gap that I now need to create to fill. You know, I need to say like, oh, here's Cal. I'm here to help people be all of themselves to create deep happiness, high performance. Oh, all right, you said that. Now you better go and become it, man. Like, right. That's it. You're calling out your greatness.
Yeah, you're calling it out. You're putting out there in the universe. But it's like, it's like my friend David, who's also a coach. He was telling me, he's like, yeah, I just start putting things out in the universe. He's like, when we moved back here to the Seattle area, he's like, he's like, this is the type of house that we wanted. This is the area. Like, he's like, he's just sort of like spoke it. And it's like, there's a difference between just speaking it and then walking away, and speaking it and then doing the work to try and manifest it. It's just like, he could say, this is the type of house that I want, and then do zero house hunting. He's never going to get that house. But, it's like, he's like, yeah, I wanted a log cabin style home in the middle of this city. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, how ridiculous, like log cabin style home in the city seems like a needle in a haystack. You're probably never going to find it. And he's like, yeah, within like 3 months, we found it. It was within our budget. They liked us. We liked them, and we got it.
Yeah, there's something called your RAS, your reticular system, to or to something system. But it's
Okay.
like if you say to yourself, oh, I'm gonna look for pink minis, or like, I don't know, pink Chevrolets. I don't know what America. Do you have minis? Yeah, you must
Oh,
do.
of course, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then you see loads of, oh, the classic is yellow, right? Yellow mini, whatever. You start to see them. Like you actually set your awareness up to find what you want. Which sort of feels like what you're saying. It's like, if I'm going to say that I'm going to have to be it. It's like, if I say I'm going to look for that house, like, you open up your awareness to that house, like you're walking on the street and like, oh shit, it's in the, people call it like manifestation, but in some ways all it's doing is just opening up the idea of possibility so that you can receive it while it's there.
Yep.
You pass the estate agents, you're like, oh shit, that looks like a log cabin in the city. And then you say to yourself, oh, you know, I'm Eric Simpson. I'm an identity coach. And then you're flicking through LinkedIn and you're like, oh, someone's having trouble with their identity, or there's a conference about identity. And you go along and you meet some people, and then, do you know, it's just like the first step. You know, the Chinese proverb of like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one small step.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got to, you set your marker out, and then you start to close that bridge through tiny steps. And I couldn't get this, I don't know, I was thinking about this earlier. I heard this really, really great analogy. A rugby player and his, I guess he's some sort of coach or men's coach. He sees a guy called Carl Sinclair. He shared a story about an idea where, like, it's the idea of breaking inertia, really, I suppose.
Mm.
You know, we talked about it, right? Oh, we've spoken about it. So we'll explain it for people not listening. But like, in World's Strongest Man, they pull trucks, but they've got a rope on their back, and they know where they need to get to, like 20 or 30 meters away. But once you know where you're going, you don't look up. You focus on taking the tiniest step that you can, because once the truck starts moving and momentum's on your side, the energy, you create energy for yourself, your steps get bigger, you start to move faster, and by the end, you know, they're almost upright running with it, some of them. The point is, like, set out the bridge by declaring what it is. I am this, so that you can then start to break the inertia and, like, just like your friend, start to step into becoming the closing the bridge by becoming the thing on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly like the rocket ship analogy earlier. It's like,
Yeah.
it's all of the energy is required right at the front.
Yeah, mate, I wanted to jump in on that because I was thinking, do you know what the cool thing about that is like, because I describe how force versus power's working with nature. So I've talked about surfing, like swimming out against the waves is like fucking loads of energy. I don't know if James taught me this, or I just think it myself. Maybe James taught me it. It's like swimming out to the waves is force. It's going against nature. And then you catch the wave in and you're working with it, and that's power. But I was thinking about when a ship takes off, like, the more momentum it has, the less gravity, well, it can accelerate against gravity, but there's a lot of force in it. But I was thinking, as soon as you're out of the atmosphere, you've got no resistance, and that's kind of what it feels like. The real breakthrough is, it's not just from inertia to going 400 miles an hour vertically or whatever they reach, but then just that point where it's just like nothing is against you almost.
Right.
And I was thinking about how, like, we're doing a podcast, Joe Rogan does podcasts, but by now it's like he's in space. Like, he could release anything and a million people are going to listen. There's almost like zero resistance, I'd imagine, because he knows whatever he puts out, it's gonna, do you know what I mean? I don't know,
Right.
just working with this analogy a little bit.
Right. Well, it's also taking like the world's strongest man competition. It's like you and I have done a couple of sessions together, where we talked like, okay, it's all about taking those like 1,000 tiny steps, like right at the very beginning, just to like break the inertia and get a little bit of momentum. And then you're sort of like churning, but then you got to get to a point where you cut the rope.
That's it. Yeah.
Like that's the process of being to becoming. That's the creativity. Like it's a lot of hard work. Creativity isn't always glamorous. Like you can go to a museum and see all these beautiful pieces of art, or go to a concert, or go see a TED talk. Like you're seeing the final no resistance product. You're not seeing everything that happened before that. So it's like you have to tell yourself, you have to remind yourself, it's like it's tying back into the upper limit. It's like the process of like creativity and becoming into that next phase of yourself is a lot of hard work. But the end result is always a beautiful thing. You are more yourself. You are putting and creating amazing things into the world, whatever it might be. Like that's always more fulfilling. Like my journey, just from the first time we met to today, I would never have imagined that you and I would be talking about this like 6-9 months ago, however long ago it was when we first met. But I can see all of the things that I have done in that time to get me to here. And it was hard. It was really painful, but I am now super grateful. I'm super appreciative. And it's like, yeah, I still feel resistance, but I don't feel as much resistance. It's easier. The process is moving. There's momentum. And so I think that's the whole point of just life. It's the journey of 1,000 miles. You have to take a step.
Yeah.
And that was like one of the very first things on my like perfect system for achieving your dreams is you have to start today and you just take one step.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And the funny thing is, like, we talked about the hard work, right? But like, for me at least, I think you have to try and get in your power as quick as possible. And power is like an effortless but skillful use of like what's pouring through you already. Sometimes to get into it, it's a little bit of force, and that's the bit that feels a little bit hard. But like, do you know what? For me, it's just like, fuck it, just start recording or start typing. And you think about that, it's there is resistance, but you use that little bit of willpower, that finite bit of willpower that you have each day, just to pump into getting in line with nature. And then all of a sudden, I bet when you're writing those posts, I bet between like 0 and 100 words is slow typing, but I bet 100 to 500 or 1,000 is like you're not thinking about what each and every word means. It starts getting to flow.
Right.
So, yeah, kind of breaking the inertia by using force to get into power seems like the answer to me, but inevitably, like, you meet resistance. I want to deny that. I want to deny that and pretend that no, I can always realize I'm just my consciousness and I don't need to be limited and I can just express it. But it's I don't have to practice being, but I do still have to be, and that means letting go. I have to, every day I'm holding it. That's my resistance, is holding on to this idea of what people think and then just let go.
Yep.
And then I can be, and then I'm into my power. But almost consciously, I have to let go and open up, surrender.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's key. It's just like the process of just surrendering to the creative process. That was like early on in my writing, like that was a big thing. It was just like I was holding on, and it made it harder. But as soon as I like hit submit on that first post, it was just like it felt like the grip was breaking a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like now I'm getting to the point where it's just like you said, that like the first 100 words is hard and then it sort of like flows. It's like, well, you can then magnify that, like I did this weekend, and it's just like I wrote five articles in a single day because I just allowed the momentum of the first to lead to the second, to lead to the third, to lead to the fourth. Like, and in less than an 8-hour time frame, I had 5 articles, photos, everything was scheduled and ready to go.
Yeah, mad.
And now I can lean into that momentum and put my efforts into other areas throughout the rest of this week.
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, now I have to start over every single day and write something new. And the process is like this versus like, upward momentum.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, man. This conversation's been so rich, full of great topics so far. Is there anywhere else you want to go with it, or do you feel pretty complete with it?
I think the only thing like that's still kind of stuck in my mind, and I think we've talked about it a little bit, is just sort of this like concept that creativity is just living.
Yeah.
And so many people, I think, get stuck in like creativity means I have to paint or draw or be a musician. It's like, you don't. Like,
Yeah.
you can go be creative and go for a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Like, I've
Yeah.
got this like right above my screen here, I've got this amazing like photograph of like a sunrise coming through the trees of a forest. And
Yeah.
it's just like, I could just be like staring at this photo, and all of a sudden, like, oh, creativity hits me, and it's just like, oh, I need to go like write this thing, or like
Yeah.
record this video, or talk to this person. Like, creativity is just so much more, and it's so much richer than I think people allow themselves to think. Like, you made the comment of like, oh, I'm not a creative person. That's an upper limit.
Yeah.
As soon as you can realize that you can be creative in you could be a creative in, while you want to make sure you're legal in this, you could be creative in your accounting, like, don't be cooking the books. You could be creative in marketing, you could be creative in customer service, or whatever it is. Like, there's room for creativity.
Oh man, I was thinking, I don't know how I'm gonna make this make sense, but like, yeah, I think sometimes you can put things on a pedestal and realize that it is nothing more than just an expression of yourself, and that is literally all most things are. So like rugby, for example, before a game, be like, fucking hell, what's all this, it's the massive task, what's going on, like nervous and all of this, and then you step on the pitch, you catch a ball and or tackle someone, you're like, oh, it's just rugby. Oh, it's just do it, it's just being and then doing, and that's it. And it's you create this monster in your mind, and then you get into it, you break the momentum, and you're like, oh right, no, it's just pulling a track, or it's whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I think that's when you realize it's just an expression of your best, really, of who you are.
And there's so much room for creativity in sports. Like, how you decide to move your body in relation to everyone else on the field or the pitch or whatever you're doing is a creative dance.
Yeah.
Like, you might say like, I have to go that direction, but there's someone in the way, so now I have to go that direction. Like, it's all that process of getting from point A to point B, and how you do it is creativity.
Well, maybe I should have been more creative then. I had like one route, and that was it.
You just said muscle, go.
Or just but then like people just tackle you, and then everyone's like, why didn't you just like step them? And I'm like, I'm not, should have been more creative. But yeah, it's I think it's a really important point to allude to. Like, life is creativity, being is creativity, expression of being is creativity. So you don't have to put it on a pedestal, just be yourself and let it flow from there.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
May I appreciate, thanks so much for being on this call. I'm really glad we got to do this, and I feel like there's so many gems that you brought to today which people are going to benefit from. And
I mean, you as well. So thanks for always having and putting the invite out there. I'm glad we can make it happen.
Yeah, man.